My guest today is Carlos Robles. Carlos, how are you today, sir?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here in the podcast for the very first time. Yeah.
I'm excited to have you. What do you do for a living?
Oh, well, so that's a loaded question, but I'm a principal product manager with Microsoft. I am part of this team that is called the SQL Developer Experiences, and we're responsible for building the different tools, the different services that developers can use to build applications that happens to use a SQL Server, and I mean any flavor of SQL Server database. So it can be Azure SQL database, can be Fabric SQL database in Fabric, can be regular SQL Server, SQL Server 2025. So yeah, that's what I do. I'm a product manager here with Microsoft.
The tooling it changes sometimes. New tools are created, and other ones disappear. Right? That's always in flux.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Actually, yeah, that's something I missed to mention. So, as product manager, I'm responsible, or let's say, of a charter, right? So for me, it's a developer experience for modern developers. So for me, it's VS Code basically, and that's something we will
That's
be talking today for
development
sure.
environment tools.
Exactly, yeah, it's an IDE. But as you mentioned, we have other tools. So if you are, let's say, an admin, you can use SSMS. If you don't want to use a tool at all, you can use the portal. The portal has certain experience that allows you to connect. So SSDT is there, Visual Studio, so many different tools. And as I said, some tools disappear, and that happens because the way things are moving, and one of those tools is ADS. So probably need to bring that up
Sure.
as
ADS stands for what?
Azure Data Studio. That's a great question. Yeah, Azure Data Studio. So in terms of Azure Data Studio, that's probably one question some of our audience will have, or some of your followers will have. Like, yeah, you have this guy that will talk about VS Code and SQL in the scope of tools. So what's going on with ADS? So we made a hard decision to retire ADS from the market, and we announced that back in February 2020, this year, February this year. The goal is to like shut down ADS for good on next year. So by February, the end of February of next year, uh, ADS won't be longer, like we won't support it anymore. So that means that there will be no patches, no updates, no new development. Again, it was a hard decision, but I think it makes sense. The reason why we decided to do it was because it's a very taxing and very time consuming task. For those that are not familiar with ADS is a fork of VS Code. So it's kind of a clone, if you will, but it's a clone, and on top of that has like these very focused experience of databases and being like an IDE for databases. But VS Code is the most popular IDE in the market. More than 50 million users like uses that tool every day. So for us, it was hard to maintain both at the same time. So we made the decision to retire ADS and focus on the MS SQL extension.
Right.
There are some nuances there, but yeah, we'll stop here in case you have any questions for me.
No, so it sounds like what's happening is that the functionality that was available in ADS is available through extensions within Visual Studio Code. So users, if they're using VS Code, they're not going to lose anything, but they may have a paradigm shift when they migrate.
That is correct. That's something else that I wanted to mention. That's very important. Um, VS Code is a very complete ecosystem that is very flexible. You can customize at your will, like from the themes, from the shortcuts, from extensions. So it's very rich. I would say like very rich. Something very important to say is that the MS SQL extension is not going to be a like for like or drop-in replacement for ADS. We made some hard decisions when we were like looking at what things will make sense for VS Code, what things won't make sense, and I will get to that point in a second. So you mentioned that it's going to work the same VS for most of the features, but there will be some changes because VS Code is different, right?
Right.
So, for example, one of the things that many different users always complain about is like in ADS, you can press F5 to run a query. On VS Code, if you press F5, it's going to open the debugger because it's a different tool. But that doesn't mean that you cannot change it. So it's flexible, customizable. So you can like update your key bindings and make sure like it behaves the way you are used to. We're working to make that decision easier for our customers. We have some plans to help with that, but I still, as I said, it's a plan. There is another thing I want to mention, very brief here, is that not every single, so ADS has like the concept of extensions. It's very similar to VS Code. So you can install an extension for DACPAC export import, or there was an admin extension that comes with SQL agent. It comes with like SQL profiler. It allows you to do many different admin tasks. We are not bringing that experience to VS Code because, as I mentioned, we are focusing more on the developer persona and also based on adoption. That's very important when we're working on tools, and that's something I want to share here with the audience, is that we analyze the adoption. Was the tool or this extension specifically like broadly adopted by your users? They really like it, they really use it. Unfortunately, there was different extension that they didn't have the adoption we were looking for. So we had to make the tough decision to say, yeah, these probably it's not a good use case of our time here. So we decided to make the hard decision not to bring all those experiences. But I would say probably 90% of the experience might be the same. There will be some changes. For example, SQL agent, SQL profiler, something highly requested. We're thinking about it.
Right.
Maybe we can do something with GitHub Copilot. So that's the GitHub Copilot basically opens the door to many different experiences that we can build in the future.
True. Yeah, I totally get the idea that you have there's a finite number of people working on this, and you want to focus on the tools that people are going to use. If 1,000,000 people are
Exactly.
using this tool and 5 people are using that tool, well, let's make the 1,000,000 people happy, even though the 5 people will be a little
Yes.
bit disappointed.
Yeah.
Well, those are exaggerated numbers, of course, but that's
No, but that's the case. Yeah, that's the case. It's hard, but as you said, many different like if this group of users will benefit with the investment here, that's what we want.
yeah.
That's what we want.
Let's talk about moving forward now. What are the cool things that are happening in these extensions for?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So for
Yes,
the
sir.
extension, as I said, the extension has been out since 2017, so plus 8 years in the market in VS Code, but it didn't receive too much love. I will say, to be honest, until November 2024. That was the date when we started to like analyze what was going on with the extension because we were getting ready for the ADS retirement, and we come up with this plan in November 2024. Yeah, that was Ignite last year. We released what we call the new UI or the modern UI or rich experience. There was different teams, different names when we were planning this, and that new UI brought new experiences into extension. We had a new connection dialog. We improved the query results experience. We introduced the query plan analyzer, the table designer. So as I said, the extension has been out for a while, but excuse me, it didn't receive too much love until November 2024, and that's exactly when we start to like deliver more and more features. So that's I wanted to start with that context. um, since November 2024 we have been releasing very interesting things. For example, schema compare, that was one of the experiences that exists on ADS,
Yeah.
but they doing the differentiation here for the developer persona. We introduced a schema designer. Schema designer is a visual tool that gives you a visual representation of your schema, but also allows you to make changes. If you want to make changes right there, maybe you're not very familiar with T-SQL and you want to make changes to a table, you can edit the tables from there and you will get the script. So that was based on feedback from developers. Developers told me, yeah, this is super helpful. It helps me understand my projects very fast. I can make changes without like having to learn T-SQL. So it was fantastic. So we introduced those
Well, it's also
features.
a good way to learn T-SQL. See
No,
the code.
exactly. That's the other. Yes, yes. And for documentation purposes, it's also very important. Some projects don't have a ER diagram, and you can just export the diagram from there. You can export the whole T-SQL and understand how the relationships were made. So yeah, it's fantastic. So yeah, that's a really good use case. So we introduced that, and then we decide, okay, it's time for us because AI is everywhere, right? And GitHub Copilot is super popular, and we were like, okay, yeah, it's time. So we introduced GitHub Copilot in May this year, and that's when we GA our UI. Remember, I mentioned about the new UI, about all those different experiences we introduced. So May was the a huge milestone for us because we introduced GitHub Copilot, we introduced Schema Compare, Schema Designer. And with GitHub Copilot, I would say like open the door for even more experiences, and we're not done yet. So you asked me about the future. I share some of the stuff we're working on. But when we introduced GitHub Copilot back in May, it was, I would say, a basic experience to some degree. It was chat. So we're like taking it like baby steps, right? Because it's a database, so some developers might be nervous about what's going on. But with that, we introduced, I would say, a very interesting set of features in the context of the database for a project. And that is, I would say, the first one is to understand a database. So remember, we discussed like Schema Designer. It can help you understand T-SQL, but with the introduction of GitHub Copilot in the context of the extension, you can ask Copilot, help me like explaining this database schema for me. Explain what this store procedure is doing. Explain why these relationships were made in this way. So it was very interesting for us to talk to developers and explore these different features that we can introduce for them. So yeah, that was one, and I have more.
I want
Like
to
you
talk
can
about
go ahead.
GitHub Copilot because you say you introduced it. GitHub Copilot, of course, has been around for a long time,
Oh yeah,
but you basically added the context of a database to GitHub
yeah,
Copilot. Is that a matter of tweaking the large language model that it's working with, or how does that work?
yeah. That's an interesting question, and actually I forgot. So you're very sharp, David. Thank you so much for asking those really good questions. So yeah. Um, let's say that GitHub Copilot, as you mentioned, is an extension of VS Code, right? So if you have a GitHub subscription, and you can use it, and it will work, right? But how do we enable GitHub Copilot to have the context of my database? So VS Code has like this ecosystem of tools. So when you create an extension, you can create what is called a chat participant. So in our case, our chat participant is called at MSQL. So
Ah,
that chat, yeah. So it's like an add-in or add-on. I don't know what's the perfect word
no,
here,
I'm good. Yeah,
but yeah, GitHub Copilot has like the extension.
sure. Like
When you
at
install the
Workspace
extension,
is one that I use a
e-
lot, which understands the entire repository of a code base, and
exactly.
that's a relatively new thing in GitHub
Yeah,
Copilot.
exactly. So you install the extension, and then suddenly, if you're using GitHub Copilot, you will see that you have a chat participant that is specialized in the extension. So, what can this chat participant do? Many things. It requires to have an open connection if you are in ask mode. It requires to have an open connection to your database, so it can understands the context through that connection. So you can basically ask questions. So you are connected to database AdventWorks, let's say, on
Mhm.
a local server. So you can ask questions like, "Oh, list all the different tables on this database and explain this schema to me. Explain this store procedure. I don't understand." So that's how the context is given. That's for ask mode. But in agent mode is more interesting, David, because in the agent mode you don't have to like when you are interacted with chat GitHub Copilot in ask mode or in the chat, you have to do at MSQL, ask your question, at MSQL, ask your question.
Okay.
In agent mode, you don't have to specify which chart participant you want to use. The agent is intelligent enough to discover different tools you have in your environment and then make decisions. Sometimes those decisions will be wrong, so you can give a hint. You can say, using the MS SQL tools, I want you to connect to my X database on my cloud server. So the agent is going to discover different tools, and we have plenty of tools. And it will say, like, oh, the first thing I need to do is to list the different connections in your environment. The second is to pick the server that you mentioned in your prompt. Is going to figure out the connection details, then it's going to connect to the server, then it's going to list the databases, find the database you mentioned, pick the database, and do the action that you asked for. So it's very impressive to see how agent is capable to figure out all those different steps one by one and then do what you are asking for. So yeah, there is a nuance there. It was a very loaded answer, I know, but
No,
yeah, the
that's good feedback.
integration,
Thank you.
yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting how it works. And as I said, behind the scenes, that's something I can share. Behind the scenes, this chat participant uses. We have something that is called the SQL tool service. It's like the core. You can think about it like an API that the extension uses. So the SDS with in combination with these specialized LLM, like it just talks to the database using these APIs. Like when you ask to run a query, it just uses this backend and then communicates back to your connection and it returns the data. And it's super important here to mention, and I'll stop talking here so I can give you some some space for questions. We don't keep any data. So and that's how GitHub Copilot works. We don't store any prompts. We don't like PII. We don't have access to anything. So yeah, we don't know what the customers are doing. What we are just enabling them is the tools. So the tools to run a query, the tools to list the server, to list the tables. We don't know what they are doing. We don't have telemetry. All we know is like when there is an error that is reported, or maybe there is like this thumbs up, thumbs down mechanism in GitHub
Right.
Copilot. We keep track of how good our responses are, but we don't store anything. So that's very important to mention.
That's a common question I get. I'm giving GitHub Copilot access to my data, my proprietary data. Are we going to use that, are my competitors going to be able to see that? And that assurance
Yeah.
sets minds at ease a lot. Are there some cool tools that you're particularly excited about besides GitHub Copilot, or that are either now or are coming in the future?
Yeah, so for now, we recently introduced one that has been very popular so far is the SQL container. So SQL 2025 was released in public preview back in May, and we were like looking at different ways how developers are working, and there is no question that developers really love containers. So we were like, okay, yeah, maybe we can introduce an option here, a new experience in the extension to allow developers to create containers with a couple clicks. And we did it. So we introduced the SQL container. It was well received, and we're like thinking about how we can involve that. Then we introduced the integration with Fabric. Fabric is becoming a very popular
Yes.
platform, and we have SQL database in Fabric. So for customers, they have the Azure experience already in the extension, so you can browse your different resources in Azure. So we were like, okay, yeah, let's enable Fabric for those users that really wants to interact with their Fabric databases in the extension. So now we have that experience. And with that, we also introduced the option to provision. So if you're a Fabric user, you can browse the different workspaces and connect to your databases. But also, when we introduced the SQL container, we were like thinking, yeah, maybe we can take the learnings here and do the same for SQL database in Fabric. So once again, with a couple of clicks, you can provision a SQL database in Fabric from the extension. So you don't have to leave the extension to do it. So that's two of the, I would say, newest features we introduced, but we have more planned in our pipeline. So one of the things that is important for us for now is to close the gap in terms of parity with ADS. So in our roadmap, that I can drop the links or we can share the links at the
Yes,
end.
please.
In the roadmap, we you can learn what is coming next. So it's like we have like these releases are happening, these like previous releases and the current release, and then future releases. And for that, as I mentioned, ADS is very important for us. We need to close the gap. So we'll have backup and restore. We will have edit data. It's a super popular request from our users. So yeah, we're working on it. DAC back export import is also very, very popular. So we're working on it. We might introduce something called Table Explorer. Edit data will be the foundation for that. Right now in the extension, you can explore what is in your table, but it's just right click, select top 1000 and just return the data. Our or what we're trying to do with that is like with a couple of clicks, maybe you can open a table. It will show you just the preview of the, let's say, the top 10 rows. You will be able to edit the data. You will be able to see the relationships in the scope of that table. So yeah, we have very interesting things we're talking about, thinking about the future with that feature. SQL DB provision, so Azure SQL database provisioning. As I mentioned, we have the local container, we have Fabric now. So we want to make easier for developers to provision SQL databases without leaving the extension. So everything within VS Code. And then we have something more for GitHub Copilot. And actually, it would be cool to hear in the comments if like the your listeners has other ideas, but we want to right now the interaction with GitHub Copilot is through the chat, right? So you have to it's basically on demand, I would say. But we're thinking ways to introduce GitHub Copilot or AI more natively into the extension. I can give you an example. For
Interesting.
example, you run a query and that query is performing slow and it's taking more than 2 minutes, let's say. What we're thinking is maybe what we can do is like the query results, we can bring AI to you and say, hey, this query is running slow. Do you want some help? I can help you figure out what's going on and provide you recommendations. This is available today, but as I said, it's on demand. You have to ask like before running the query, like help me understand what's going on here or analyze the query. So what we want to do is like make it like natively and
Yeah,
proactively. So to bring value to our customers
I
and
like that.
also you like it, yeah. I
Maybe a
figure
little
out
paper, a little paper clip, a little talking paper clip pop up and say, "Looks like you're running a
that.
slow query. Would you like help optimizing it?"
Yeah, yeah, like Clippy 2.0. Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Like, yeah, this sounds like Clippy, but we can see, like, imagine this. Right? Maybe you have a typo. That's something very common. When you run a query, you have a typo, and it's like, oh, you had to fix the typo. What if these like AI assistant can fix the typo for you just with a couple clicks and you don't have to type? So we want developers to be more productive, to focus on what it matters. Like those little things, we can help. There are other opportunities. I mentioned Schema Designer. So let me ask you this, David. Schema Designer, as I mentioned, is a visual tool, allows you to modify your schema, understand your schema. But what if we introduce GitHub Copilot to that experience? Imagine this, that you can ask Copilot to bring your ideas into this visual representation in the screen, modify it, and take you from there to the next step. So that's kind of what we're thinking there, like
Nice.
integrating GitHub Copilot into the schema designer.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and top of that, in the roadmap, you'll find more. We have other developer tools we're considering. It's not done yet, or it's not a done deal, but we're considering integrating more with Data API Builder, Azure's SQL bindings for functions. Fabric has also a flavor of functions. So we're thinking about something we can do here to help developers. You have a schema, for example. Why not helping you to get to the next step by creating the API using these tools? So we understand the schema already, so we can probably build the configuration that is required for Data API Builder to like surface those API endpoints for you. So those kind of the ideas we have. Oh, there's another one. Actually, I can share. Um, Many different times, like if you're a developer and you don't have much experience with tuning, database tuning or performance tuning, that's very hard to achieve. And sometimes organization has DBAs that they know how to do this, but in an organization that you have to do everything, sometimes you have to come up with that. So we're thinking about these other integration in query results that maybe can provide you a report saying, hey, this query is running slow. And provide you the different, like the explanation. Oh, it's running slow because it's missing an index here. And after you add an index, the improvement will like translate to reduce the time in 20%. It will reduce the I don't know, disk usage and so many different things. So we're thinking about also adding these kind of performance reports as well. But again, I'm sharing all this information because I would like to hear what your audience think about. Like, this is not set in stone. We're
Yeah.
just getting started, so we are happy to take feedback and understand what will be really helpful for developers in the future.
We're just about at time. Are there any final thoughts?
Well, what I'm going to say is like we're going to provide your listeners with all the different links. So we have multiple links. We have links with demos, links with like how to report a bug, how to learn about the extension. There is a wiki here that can be helpful if you're not familiar with VS Code and you want to change those shortcuts, because it's a very common thing. You can use the wiki. So yeah, we'll provide you with all the different links. The last thing I want to say is, as I mentioned, this is not a drop-in replacement for ADS. We made some tough decisions, but we are bringing some of the experiences. So please bear with us. We listen to your feedback, and we really appreciate your feedback. So I encourage you to share more feedback, and so that help us to curate our roadmap. Last thing I want to say is like, make sure to follow David's podcast, like Friends with Technology. Really, as I said, really excited to be here for the very first time. Hopefully, it's not just the first one, and maybe I will have a chance to talk to you, David, in the future about technology here. And yeah, that's probably all I have.